Hi, in this video we're going to look at adding positive and negative integers. Okay, let's use the number line to show addition of two positive numbers and two negative numbers. First of all, the positives. Now we know what the answer is to this, but let's look at the number line. This is the number 2 because it's 2 units to the right. It's a positive 2. I'm going to add 3, which is a positive number, so I go to the right. This is a positive 3, and I end up at the number 5. And we all know that 2 plus 3 is 5. Now let's look at this one. This is a negative 4, so negative 4 is 4 units to the left because it's negative, and I'm going to add on to that 2 units to the left because I'm adding a negative 2. Now where I end up with this one is a negative 6. So now I want you to take a look at something here. 2 and 3 is 5, and 4 and 2 is 6. Now look at what I just did there. I ignored the negatives and just added the number part, which we call the absolute value. So if they're both positive, I can add the absolute value of 2 and the absolute value of 3 and get 5. Same with negatives. If I have a negative 4 plus a negative 2, I add the 4 and the 2 and get 6, and because they're both negative, my answer is negative. Think of it this way. If it's 2 degrees below 0, and you add another 4 degrees below 0, you are 6 degrees below 0. Or in football, if you lose 4 yards and then you lose another 2 yards, you're 6 yards back. So when you add two negatives, you get a negative, and by definition, if the signs are the same, so if the signs are the same, you are going to add the absolute values. Now the sign on your answer will be the same as the sign of your numbers. So if you add two positives, you get a positive. If you add two negatives, you get a negative. Let's just do a few of these so we make sure that we've got this down. So 4 plus 22 is 26. Negative 3 plus negative 9. As soon as you see they're both negatives, you look at the absolute value, the 3 and the 9. When you do that, you get 12. And because these were both negative, your answer is negative. Next we have 5 plus 7, which is 12. Then we look at negative 4 plus negative 8. If I look at the absolute value, I have 4 plus 8, which is 12. So I write the 12 down, and because they're both negative, the answer is negative. All right, I think the hardest ones to do are when you have one positive number and one negative number. So let's take a look at those on the number line first. I've got 3, which is 3 units to the right because it's positive. And then I have a negative 7, which is 7 units to the left. So if I start where I ended and I go 7 units to the left, it takes 3 units to get to the 0, but then I have to go 4 more units to make a total of 7 units to the left. And the number I end up with is a negative 4. So 3 plus a negative 7 is negative 4. Let's look at it again. Here I've got a negative 5, and because it's negative, it goes to the left. And if I'm adding 8 to it, I have to go the other direction because it's a positive 8. It takes me 5 units to get back to 0, and then I still have to go 3 more units to make my positive 8. And if you look at our answer, we ended at a positive 3. Now let's take a look at the absolute values like we did in the last problem. Here's the absolute value of the first number and the second number and the answer. Let's do the same here. Here's the first number, the second number, and the answer. What do you notice? Well, you should notice that I've got a 3 and a 7, and I get a 4 for an answer. Well, I know that 7 minus 3 is 4. And if I look at this, I've got a 5 and an 8, and my answer is 3. Well, we know that 8 minus 5 is 3. So I think we can use that. If I look at the first one and subtract and get 4, you just need to decide it's a 4, but is it going to be positive or negative? Well, look at the two numbers we have in yellow here. I've got a 3 and a 7. 7 is larger. It was a negative number. Its sign dominates, and my answer is negative. Down here, I've got an 8 and a 5. Well, 8 is larger, and it's positive. There's no negative in front of it. This is a positive 8 because I went to the right. So since 8 is bigger than 5 and 8 is positive, then my answer will be positive. And we usually don't write a plus in there. I don't say plus a positive 8, and it doesn't equal a positive 3. But in essence, that's what it means. So what you need to do when you have one of each is you look at their absolute values and you subtract. You get the number for your answer, and then you just need to decide what the sign is going to be. And you need to look at which one had the larger absolute value because it's going to dominate the sign. So let's look at a few of those. Okay, let's look at a few examples. I've got a positive 4 and a negative 20. As soon as you see that you have one of each, you need to look at the absolute value of those two numbers. So when I look at the absolute value of 4 and 20 and subtract, I get 20 minus 4 is 16. So I come back to my answer and I write a 16 as my answer. Then you need to see which was larger, 20 or 4. 20 was larger. It's negative, so its sign is going to dominate the answer, and I get negative 16. Okay, let's look at the next one. I've got a negative 3 and a positive 15. We'll look at the absolute values, the 3 and the 15. And we know that 15 minus 3 is 12. So you can write down the 12 as your answer, and then decide what sign dominates. The 3 was negative, the 15 was positive. 15 is larger. So your answer is positive. It's going to have the same sign as the 15 did. Okay, let's look at the next one. I've got a positive 7 and a negative 5. So when I look at the absolute value of 7 and 5, I can subtract and get 7 minus 5 is 2. So I come back here and I write down the number 2, and then I look at and see which one was larger. 7's larger, it's positive, so my answer is positive. And then on the last one, I've got a negative 14 and a positive 6. I've got one of each, so I actually am going to subtract those numbers. 14 minus 6 is 8. So I come back and I write down the number 8 as my answer. And then since 14 is bigger than 6 and 14 is negative, my answer is negative. Okay, here's your summary. To add two negative numbers or two positive numbers, you add the absolute values, and then the sign on the answer will match the sign of your original numbers. But if you want to add a negative and a positive number, you actually are going to subtract. You subtract the absolute values, and then the sign on the number will be the same as the sign with the larger absolute value because its sign will dominate your answer.